Me now is my very good friend and the editor-in-chief of the Truth Gazette and now the co-chair of the RNC Youth Advisory Council, Brilyn Hollyhand. So Brilyn, this has been an interview I've wanted to do for a long time, and this just happens to be a perfect setup that we get to talk about Twitter Spaces and kind of this really novel concept of a presidential announcement. And this plays right into your age group, I think, and everything that you're doing with the RNC. So congrats, first of all, and tell me a little bit about that role.
Thank you, Jenna, and thank you so much for having me on. It's always great to be here with you, and great to just get to chat with you. And I'm, been a big fan of yours for years, and really cherish our friendship. So it's an honor to be here. Yes, so there is a lot going on in politics right now. The political nerd in me is like freaking out because what a week it has been already. I guess Monday morning we had Tim Scott announce, and tonight we'll have Ron DeSantis making his official announcement on Spaces, as you said, which is so cool to me. Because I have been, back in January, we'll back it up a little bit. Let's say back in January, I came out with this article titled "The GOP Must Address the Elephant in the Room, Gen Z," and was really just talking about how, obviously we had some losses last November in the midterms. We really didn't, perform as greatly as we thought we might. And I know, you and I talked about that privately. And I've been talking to a lot of people behind the scenes, and a lot of fingers are being pointed, a lot of blame is being thrown around. And to me, from my perspective, our lack of engagement with my generation, the youth vote, was really one of the most prevalent issues. So I said, going into 2024, being a first-time voter in November of next year, I wanted to really make sure the Republican Party was focusing on us. So I have been going on every TV show that will have me on. I've been, doing every podcast, every radio show, anything I can do to get this message out there that the Republican Party needs to be focused on my generation. And the big message I've been saying is we have to reach my generation where we are, and that's online. You know that better than anybody, being on Twitter. So this is a great example of somebody actually listening to kind of this message I'm putting out there and kind of following through with it, with DeSantis doing this announcement on Spaces.
I think it's actually totally brilliant of Governor DeSantis to utilize this medium of Twitter Spaces that's really novel, and it will bring in, I think, a lot of people who wouldn't otherwise be watching Fox News or CNN or any of these other mainstream media networks to a place that is largely dominated by youth. It's largely dominated by people with a lot of varying viewpoints that may have some other kind of cookie cutter putting him in a box if he chose, for example, to just have it at a location and with kind of the high riser of all of the media just running his speech. I think this kind of discussion as well with someone like Elon Musk is really novel for a presidential announcement. So how do you think that's going to play with independents and especially with the younger generation of voters like you?
I think it's actually going to perform really well. And, like I said, we've been talking about this, trying to get this message out to where youth voters are and also independent voters. So this is a really unique opportunity, like you mentioned with, kind of this media thing here. I'm kind of unique with my generation. Most of my generation isn't necessarily paying attention to politics. They don't watch your traditional cable news at night to see, what happened today. So most of my generation would be missing this presidential announcement. They might see a headline on Instagram the next morning, but they might not actually have the opportunity to sit down and watch his full announcement speech, which I've heard is going to be pretty interesting tonight. But they might not have an opportunity to sit and watch his full announcement speech because they don't tune in to Fox or CNN or MSNBC, whatever it may be. And this is people on both sides of the aisle, just youth voters in general. Also independents typically, would shy away from Fox News or CNN. They're going to, they don't really like the more commentary side of news. So they might not watch your traditional cable, but they're also on Twitter because everybody's on Twitter. It's this, town square that Elon Musk has made here with free speech, allowing everybody in. So I think it's a really unique and, like you said, brilliant opportunity that, DeSantis' team has come up with for him to get his message and platform out there from day one.
Yeah, and I think this is actually overall going to be very helpful to the Republican Party as a whole, because one of the things that President Trump did very effectively in 2016 was to just dominate the airwaves, including the opposition media and the more liberal outlets, by saying things in his own bombastic way, but actually creating news that they had to cover, and he just sucked all the air time out of everything else. And so I think this is also going to have the effect with Governor DeSantis on Spaces of a discussion point that now you're going to see other Twitter Spaces born out of this, and people wanting to talk about this, and legacy media having to cover this in a way that, you're right, if he had done this just more traditionally, then there would have just been, the headlines and the things that people would ignore. But I think this is going to create even more news that people are going to be talking about for a lot longer.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. And like you said, I just think this is so unique because we don't normally see this. This is kind of new for all of us. And we're all going to get to, sit here with our popcorn and listen to what he has to say. Yeah, I definitely think, maybe we can even have an RNC debate, coming this fall on some type of Twitter Spaces forum or something like that, where it's not just your traditional media, because as we know, print news is kind of dying off. Cable news is going to be next with, radio and stuff like that. We really would like to have at least a use of these new spaces, new resources, new opportunities, because Elon Musk has put a lot of money into Twitter, and he's done a lot of work to make this platform free for everybody, a free speech platform for everybody to use. So I think it's an untapped resource that the RNC and the entire Republican Party needs to be focusing on.
Yeah, well, I would love to see, you have kind of a roundtable with all of the presidential candidates and, from your age group on something like a Twitter space. And so I wonder if this is projecting how some of these candidates, because I think already Vivek Ramaswamy has been utilizing not only Twitter spaces, but also some of the untraditional or non-traditional outlets, like his own podcast now, to really effectively get more name recognition, to get his message out there, and then to generate more hits on mainstream media. So how do you think that President Trump is going to have to react as, kind of the master of media? Is he going to have to come back on Twitter?
Yeah, so I texted a friend of mine, or a mutual friend of both of ours, who works for the president yesterday after this news, leaked about DeSantis' announcement tonight. And I just said, hey, you got to get that guy back on social media. I mean, you're talking about a guy that almost has 100 million followers on Twitter, and it's just been radio silence. And I totally understand he's got a contract with Truth Social. He's kind of limited right now, but hopefully they can kind of work that out and get him out of that, because he, again, has untapped resources. Just like I said, the Republican Party has untapped resources here. He has some of the largest social media accounts on all of the platforms, not just Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, everywhere. And he's been freed from these suspensions. He's allowed now on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. He can be posting content. So he absolutely needs to be. So yeah, that was my text to our mutual friend on his campaign, and just say, hey, you got to work this out. I understand, you're kind of got this legally, issue here with this contract, but this summer needs to be a time to kind of get out of that and get him back on there. Because like you said, he's a master of media. We're used to seeing Trump on these platforms speaking so boldly and so loudly and without a filter, that the mainstream media might put on him. So now DeSantis has kind of taken the step over him and saying, hey, you're not going to use Twitter, I'm going to use it. So I definitely look forward to seeing Trump back on Twitter pretty soon, hopefully.
Yeah, well, and I've had Truth Social CEO and, of course, Trump Media and Management Group, Devin Nunes, on this show. And he at least told me that there isn't any legal reason or contractual obligation that prevents Trump from coming back to Twitter, which I think is interesting. So at least that's his representation. And so if that's the case, I'm genuinely surprised that President Trump hasn't gone back on Twitter, other than just kind of wanting an outlet that maybe now people, screenshot, and there's not as much engagement with the press on his replies and other of those things. But I'm very interested to see if that calculation is going to change after DeSantis is now specifically using Twitter. And I said yesterday in a tweet responding to this, this was kind of, among other things, shots fired at Truth Social by Governor DeSantis by choosing Twitter, by choosing Elon Musk. So also, if there is an endorsement that Elon Musk makes, I've kind of heard some feedback and some opinions both ways. First, if Elon did that, it would be helpful, and that would bring in a lot of independent voters. But then I've also heard people suggest, well, it would actually look more fair and balanced if Elon just has this conversation, is a fan, but doesn't make that endorsement. So what's your calculation in terms of your age group and what they're expecting from this dialogue and this conversation?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think from a fair and balanced point of view here, to use a Fox News quote, I think that it would look better if Elon didn't necessarily make an endorsement tonight and just kind of played more the role of a moderator. I know that I don't remember the name, but I do remember that they have another moderator that's going to be on this, kind of Spaces thing tonight. Yeah, I know Elon, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe, yes, that's who it is. Yes. Sorry, it's been a long day. I believe that DeSantis has said in the past that he would be open to voting for Ron DeSantis if he ran for the presidency. But I also believe more recently he said he might not endorse a candidate. So I'm not really sure. We don't get to hear a lot. He doesn't do a lot of speeches. Elon Musk isn't really out there just walking around with cameras all the time. We really get to hear from him solely from his Twitter account. So some of these, again, could just be rumors. But if we see an endorsement tonight, I wouldn't necessarily be shocked. But from more of a fair and balanced point of view, I think it would be better if Elon Musk maybe plays moderator, and then he can have this forum open to more candidates. Maybe next week he can have Trump on and have a grand return to Trump on Twitter, have Vivek on in a few weeks, have Tim Scott on. I think it'd be a really cool opportunity. Let me say this, I'm not going to get into this battle between Trump and DeSantis right now, but I think it's really cool and really awesome that we have this deep field of incredibly qualified candidates on the Republican side here. The Democrats are the unfortunate ones here. They're stuck with Biden and Kamala. But we have so many incredible candidates to choose from. And it's so awesome to me. Only in America could a 16-year-old have the opportunity to meet with Donald Trump and meet with Ron DeSantis, the two top frontrunners to be the next president of the United States, the leader of the free world, to hold the most powerful job in the world. And I've had the opportunity to meet with both of them this past year. And I know you have as well. You had, DeSantis back on the show, I guess, yesterday. So I'm following DeSantis here. But it's really cool to me. I kind of sat there and thought about that last night. I was putting some tweets out there. Wow, like at 16 years old in this country, I've had the opportunity to meet with both of those people. So only in America. So incredibly blessed here.
Yeah, and that's so true. And I think that's such a wise position. And I wish that people much older and more experienced than you actually could borrow from your wisdom, because I think that that is perfectly stated in terms of how we as conservatives and, people who are Republicans should approach this primary and say, this is great that we have such a wide field and we have, two really excellent candidates, and even beyond that. But I think it's really going to come down to Trump versus DeSantis. But we have, a large and a wide bench. I mean, there's not anybody currently running that wouldn't be absolutely 100% better than Joe Biden. So from that perspective, I don't like to see all of the infighting. And I don't like to see if you're even open to saying anything good about Ron DeSantis, then that means that you've never supported Trump, or all of these other just ridiculous things. And to your point as well, that if Elon doesn't make that endorsement, then that may create more opportunity for future spaces with other presidential candidates. I would love to see that, because that takes us out of, kind of this historic dominance and gatekeeping by legacy media that really, I hope that the gates are being opened, and people who wouldn't have ever had the opportunity to moderate or to listen to questions and ask those questions would then get that opportunity. And I think that's a great thing for the party. It's a great thing for the candidates, and it's a great thing for America. And so do you think that that moving forward, this would actually impact the youth voters to actually engage more in civics and to respect the process and actually look forward to participating in voting in a primary where we've historically seen kind of low turnout?
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. You mentioned at the top that I am, honored to be a co-chair of this new, forthcoming RNC Youth Advisory Council. And our first in-person meeting was a few months ago. It was during my spring break, and I flew up to DC, and we had an in-person meeting with Ronna McDaniel. Ronna was on my right, and CJ Pearson was right beside me, who I know, is a mutual friend of ours as well. And, Ronna kind of turned to both of us and she said, what are some things that we could be doing with the debates coming up? It was kind of a brainstorming meeting, just kind of, get this off the ground and what are some things that we can do? And CJ and I pitched the idea of, maybe the first debate in August will be broadcasted on Fox News, more of a traditional media being gatekept, but it will also simultaneously be streamed on Rumble. And that's an idea that CJ and I pitched because young people are already on Rumble. That's where they watch their favorite, former YouTube streamers that might not have been politically correct that are now, moved over to free speech Rumble, which is an incredible YouTube alternative if you haven't looked at Rumble yet. So that's just kind of an idea that we, just kind of threw into the air, and she liked enough to actually put forth. And that's something that we will be doing with the RNC, come August for this first debate. So absolutely, I think it'd be an incredible idea to kind of, engage with my generation if we maybe hosted debates on Spaces or had, Elon continue this and do some type of forum setting. I think it'd be really cool. And I think my generation would be very interested in it because you're not just sitting there listening to some, reporter who thinks they're too big for their britches sitting there, just kind of drowning on and on and on of questions are being fed into their ears. This is actually voters who, I know you've used Spaces, you click the little blue button at the bottom and you get to, you get chosen, you get to ask a question. And I know Elon said he's going to have it open for questions tonight. So I think it'd be a really, really cool opportunity. And, DeSantis is kind of leading the way here with this.
Yeah, and I think that it really shows that he's not afraid to have, in a very public way, interaction with voters across the political spectrum, because who knows? I mean, I've been in Twitter spaces as well and engaged with people in a conversation that's also so very different than the type of engagement you see, the back and forth in the text format responses on Twitter. Spaces is a lot different, and it's a really, I think, great format. And to your point about Rumble, I think that's really wise, and I'm glad to hear that Ronna McDaniel took your suggestion. You're in CJ, and he's great as well. So congrats to you both for participating, as young people, and really taking this opportunity, because even in my generation, and I'm, kind of one of the older millennials, and even for people in my age group, like, I don't have cable anymore. I don't care. I watch all of the clips that everybody's talking about on Twitter or on other media. And, for people who are watching this podcast, probably a lot of them are watching on Rumble, and we don't necessarily care about subscribing to all of the legacy media. And that's why cable news is actually dying, and people are looking for alternatives. And so the more that we can bring the actually good content to other platforms and take it away from, a lot of these political silos, I think is a good thing. More speech is generally good to get and promote good ideas, and to have some pushback on ideas that really aren't great. So I have so many more questions and things for you, Brilyn, but I know we're out of time here. But thanks so much for this conversation and for dropping by. And I'll be really interested to hear your thoughts after you listen to Spaces tonight. So where can people find you to follow you and your media outlet, the Truth Gazette, as well?
Yes, absolutely. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. It's at Brilyn Hollyhand. And you can watch all of my interviews, read all of my articles at thetruthgazette.com. Again, that's at Brilyn Hollyhand all across social media. And the website's thetruthgazette.com. I'm about to hop in a car and go head out to another event, but I am going to be listening to this on my phone as I'm, on the way to this event, because I'm a first-time voter next year, and I'm actually interested in what this guy's got to say. I could be voting for him. We'll have to find out.
Yeah, well, that's so great. And I'm so glad that you're keeping an open mind, as everyone should in the primary. So way to go. And thanks so much, Brilyn. Safe travels. Talk to you soon.
Jenna, it's so good to see you. Thank you for having me.